Hey there, welcome back. So step 3 is developing your grant budget. Now, I know for many of you, you're like, ooh, this is the part I hate. I'm a writer. I like that part more, but we will help you overcome that and frankly, just not be intimidated by budgets anymore. So just to recap, because we're making sure it's really sticking in your mind, you're reading the funding guidelines, you're preparing a narrative skeleton, you've developed a grant schedule, you posted that super rockin' kickoff, and now it is time to totally finalize your budget so it's not holding you up any longer in preparing your grant application. So I have, in the interest of it being truly a mini course, not been covering every single thing that we go through, obviously, in start to funded. But I am slowing way down in this module, and this one will be a little bit longer than usual because the budget is a very important part of this whole process, and it can take a little bit of time to develop. And so I rather have you feel comfortable with this material and be able to truly go develop a rockin' budget so that when you are ready to get serious about the grant writing process, you've got this piece, done or close to done. So below, you can download our grant budget spreadsheet for free, which took a long time to get optimized, but it is a totally cool tool, and we're going to run through that right now. So first of all, what is a budget? So it is the financial plan for your project, itemized by major expenses to illustrate what you're going to do and how much it's going to cost. Now, each of the tabs below, when you open this up, and again, go File, Download Excel, or File, make a copy of a Google Sheet, you'll see that there's tabs across the bottom that are titled these major categories, which, by the way, coincidentally, are the same categories required for federal grants. So that if you are pursuing federal funding, you're already in the totally correct categories, and if you're not pursuing federal funds, doesn't matter, at least you still have a totally legit way to organize your budget. So, a little background. Personnel, so these are employees within your organization that are working to deliver the project. These are not contractors, people that are working on the project that aren't employed by your nonprofit, your startup. Fringe benefits are anything that supplements an employee's salary. So, health insurance, maybe your employer helps pay for a bus pass, right? Stuff like that. And so this would be a number that you're going to go and get from your bookkeeper or accountant. It's usually presented as a percentage of your total personnel costs. So if an environmental director has $40,000 in personnel costs, and 20% is fringe, then that would be $8,000. And all of this stuff is automatically calculated in the spreadsheet for you. Travel, as it suggests, is cost necessary for performance of the project. So it's fairly common to have some sort of conference travel or mandatory trainings as a part of a grant application, particularly the larger ones. So this is where you're going to go and break that down, figuring out the number of days, the lodging, flight, vehicle, and then M and IE means meals and incidental expenses. You can go on to, if you're watching this from the US, you can go to the General Service Administration and just look up the city that you would be traveling to, and it will give you those allowable rates. And then that can help you estimate your costs. Now, equipment is tangible property with a useful life of more than 1 year, or it costs more than $5,000. This is the rule for federal grants. So again, if you're not pursuing a federal grant, then this is not a super rigid definition of equipment versus supplies, which we'll get into next. But generally just think about it is this going to last me longer than supplies, which would be printing paper, something you're going to truly consume during the life of the project. So supplies, again, would be something that has costs less than $5,000 or has less of a useful life expectancy of less than 1 year. So that's how you distinguish between equipment and supplies. So contractual is all costs related to sub-recipients of your grant application. So they're not someone on your payroll. So for example, if maybe you're doing a market study, you would potentially be contracting out with a professional services firm to do that work, and you would have a quote from them, And then that would be like you are having a contract with that professional services firm to provide that service to you. And so that expense would be considered contractual. Construction is probably not something most of you will be running into, but for anyone that is doing renovation or construction of a new building or any sort of altering of a facility, you would put your construction expenses here. Other direct costs are basically anything that's not fitting into the other categories, right? So maybe an equipment rental fee or whatever. So just if you can't figure out where something else goes, that is a safe place to park it. Now, indirect costs are the costs of doing business that are not particularly identifiable to a specific project or grant. So for example, the lights are on. I cannot tell, what percent of my electricity bill can be attributed to developing or executing this project, right? Like it's too, you just can't directly correlate that cost. So indirect costs can be kind of a very confusing topic, to be totally honest. But basically, it's again another figure that you're going to get from your bookkeeper or your accountant, and it's also going to depend on the funding source you pursue, whether you're including indirect costs and how much is allowable. For example, I'm actually working on a grant right now with our team where the maximum allowable indirect is 10%, and realistically, their indirect costs are like 25, 26%. So, that's just something that you end up navigating and trying to figure out, well, where are we going to actually attribute these costs? So that's indirect cost. Cost share, which you've probably also heard the term match, is a detailed list of the cost sharing that's being done by the applicant or your partners to help pay for the total project cost. So cash cost share is what you would think it is, like actual hard cash, but it also includes things like personnel and your fringe and benefits, because that's a hard cost. If you have a project manager that you're paying maybe 50% of their time is going to this, let's say they make $100,000 and 50% of their time is going to this project, so that's $50,000. Like that's a real cash expense to your business if you're not charging it to the project or your organization. And so that is a contribution to the overall project cost, and you can count that as match. The other most common one that you're probably thinking of is InKind cost share. So this is anything made by the subrecipient or the vendor, but not you, the applicant. I know this is a little confusing, but the subrecipient would be like, you've got a project partner that says, hey, we'll also donate some time to help with education and outreach, or we're going to donate the meeting rooms for the next, 3 years so you can use the space for free. That would be an in-kind contribution towards the project. So this is a very confusing area that a lot of people get hung up in terms of how to manage what they list in cost share. So I want to just run through this budget and see if you guys can figure out what's going on. So project budget, let's say they have $5,000 of equipment costs, $45,000 of contractual labor, and their total budget is $50,000. And then in the cost share tab, they're saying, okay, we're going to put in $5,000 cash and $20,000 of in-kind staff time, which technically would be cash value staff time, I just realized. But anyway, so that is $25,000 of cost share, and they believe that they are providing a 50% match. Can you spot the mistake? Okay, here's the issue. Anything that you include in the cost share tab must be listed in any of the other tabs in your budget, because you have to be balanced. You can't pay for something as a cost. You can't pay for something in the cost share tab and then not actually have it anywhere in the budget, right? So that means we're reworking this budget. And so again, $5,000 of equipment, $20,000 of personnel staff time, $45,000 of contractual labor, and the total project budget truly is $70,000. Their cost share is not changing. They're still putting in $5,000 of cash and $20,000 of staff time, and that equals $25,000. So truly, their match is 36%, not 50%. So this can be a little thing that really can hang you up. I see almost everyone make the mistake. So just be really aware of that when you're putting together your budget. Everything in cost share, anything listed there, must be accounted for in the rest of your budget. All right, so that is what we're going to be covering in terms of budget. Feel free to just go and get into the spreadsheet, open it up, have a look at it. Remember, you don't actually type anything into the blue. It's only in the white, and then the rest will auto-populate. Now, just a few bits of advice. Every funder pretty much wants budget information presented differently, and it can be very challenging to keep track of your costs when you've got multiple budget formats. So we recommend that you use the budget spreadsheet we just provided you as a base camp, right? It's your budget that you build for no matter what project you tackle. It's your base camp budget, right? It is where you reference when you then go and fill out other subsequent budget forms that might be required for the grant application. Sometimes a budget template's not provided, and this makes a very nice and presentable template that you can export as a PDF, either all of the pages or just the summary, and you look super pro. It's got a great template. So just be aware that if you're pursuing like 3-4 grants and they all have different budgets and you're trying to keep track of what you're asking for from who, just keep it all in one budget as your base camp. A couple other budget tips. It's a very iterative process. Nobody sits down and cranks out a budget the first time perfectly. So you're going to often just estimate costs, like literally just putting in numbers that kind of make sense based on your guessing. And then you roll back in and you start researching those costs by looking up the expenses online or asking for quotes, right? And then that's how you kind of massage the budget into being more accurate, because you're really going and truth verifying the figures. If you can, be sure to check with your funding agency to confirm that all of the expenses that you've listed are considered eligible. A lot of times this is not something you can figure out in the funding guidelines. It might be something very persnickety, like they will not pay for laptops, and maybe that's like a really big part of your application. So you want to know that so it's not turned down and you can go find another funding source to pay for it. So just a little pro tip. And with that, let's go ahead and close here on the topic of budgets. I know it's a lot, and we're going to roll into step 4, which is all about key attachments. I'll see you there.